She's so fine. Hell of a blows my mind. Hell of a lights my day.
What's good, guys? I was sent a video by my subscriber D Walsh, and she wanted me to check out a story. And I liked the way the video was laid out, and I wanted to cover the story as well. So thank you for sending that to me. I appreciate it. And let me know if you like the way this story is laid out, and I may just keep doing this for the future videos. But let's get into this story. This story takes place in Cantonment, Florida, in the county of Escambia, and it's close to Pensacola. Now, Deshanique Lavender, who was 20 in 2019, Alexandria Banks, 18, more affectionately known as Renee, and Samara Glennice Cooks, who was the baby at 15, were all cousins, and they were super, super close. They did everything together. They were more like sisters. And it really worked well because Samara was actually an only child, and she considered the girls to be sisters to her. The friends and family actually referred to them as the Three Amigos. And they did all kinds of things together. They would go to Whataburger, or they would go to Waffle House, or run to Walmart at 10 o'clock at night. Just things that teenagers would typically do. Samara loved to dance. She played the tuba. Just an all around vivacious young lady. Now, the Three Amigos took in a fourth member, Delia or Leah Gibson, who was 18 in 2019. And although she was not blood related to them, she fit in perfectly. I'll talk about Delia for a moment. Delia was very responsible. She was actually a cashier at the local Walmart. She was saving up her money so that she could pay her tuition to Pensacola State College, where she had just completed her freshman year. She had graduated not long ago from Tate High School, and she was in the ROTC while she was there. She was in the AKA sorority while she was at Pensacola State College. And when her father took her to get her driver's license, it was then that he realized she wanted to become an organ donor. Now, Delia was very talented. She played the violin, and just like Samara playing the tuba, they had that in common with each other. The group just clicked. And when Delia's father heard that she wanted to be an organ donor, he spoke to her about that. He said it was a proud moment of his as a father to know that his daughter was willing to do that. And Delia had dreams of becoming a nurse. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to genuinely help people. Now, I have to bring this up because it does mean something. Samara Cooks and Renee Banks and Deshanique Lavender, as I told you before, were all cousins. They were part of a super large family with deep, deep roots in the Cantonment, Florida area. Their grandfather was one of 24 siblings who each inherited pieces of land in an area surrounding the intersection of Cedar Point Road and Cedar Point Lane. And at last count, that was some 10 years back, there were 350 great grandchildren, and just the previous month, they had just had 3 more babies who were born into that next generation. So, super large family. And Delia was not blood related to them, but she was considered family. And she and Renee Banks had actually met while they were in daycare. And both of their parents said that they became instant friends the moment they met each other and had continued that friendship on into young adulthood. Renee's mother actually said that she called Delia her adopted daughter. So this is a super, super tight people. And Samara actually was an only child. So this was perfect for her because she didn't have those siblings growing up. And she loved to hang out with her cousins and she loved to go to Florida. And this was actually her last summer of vacation. And she wanted to spend that in the Gulf Coast area. So she was allowed to do that because they ended up moving just maybe 3 months before all of this happened. So, on one hand, it was a really nice thing that happened, meaning that when Samara moved there, it just really worked out well for all of the people involved. Now, let's get to the point of this story, the crux of the story, if you will. On Monday, July the 29th, 2019, just before 1:30 a.m., the four girls were traveling in a Ford Focus driven by Deshanique Lavender. For whatever reason, the car veered into the other lane, swerved back, overcorrecting, and struck a utility pole, and the car landed in a tree line. Both Samara Cooks and Delia Gibson were ejected from the vehicle and were injured fatally. Now, the Florida Highway Patrol came upon the scene of the crash, and this is where things took a turn for the worst. The Florida Highway Patrolman found the identification for Delia Gibson on the ground at the scene. It was at that point that things got confusing, because he misidentified Delia as Samara and Samara as Delia. Both Deshanique and Renee were taken via ambulance from the scene in very critical condition. They were taken to Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, and Deshanique had a subarachnoid hemorrhage or severe concussion and internal bleeding to her stomach. Renee had fractured skull, crushed eye socket, a broken neck, crushed sinus cavity, and a broken shoulder. Now, since the Florida Highway Patrolman had misidentified the bodies, his reports were also wrong, and the parents were not allowed to see their children when they were in the medical examiner's office or with the coroner. They made multiple requests to do that. They were denied that. So, had they been allowed to do that, they might have caught this on the front end. Now, since the Florida Highway Patrolman had misidentified them and that carried on into the coroner's office, medical examiner's office, it continued on to the funeral home. One of the girls was supposed to be taken to Tracy Morton Memorial Chapel, and the other was supposed to go to Faith Chapel funeral services. Now, the Florida Highway Patrolman had an identification, photo identification. The coroner and medical examiner had the same as well. And the funeral home had larger photos of both girls. They looked nothing alike. They were different ages, different heights, different weights, all of that. The funeral home called the mother of Samara Cooks, Renata Cooks, and said, "We're trying to dress her, but these clothes are not fitting her." And it's because they were trying to fit Samara's clothes on Delia. And that created a huge problem. When Renata Cooks and Tammy and Demetrius Gibson were finally allowed to see their loved ones, it was at the funeral home. And this is where the story takes another turn, because they had prepared themselves to see their daughter's body. That wasn't the case. When Renata Cooks showed up at the funeral home, she saw Delia. And that sadly gave her a little glimmer of hope, thinking that maybe someone had made a mistake and that her daughter was still alive. That's very unfortunate. Now, what happened next is even more shocking. The funeral homes, with the help of the Florida Highway Patrol, then decided to switch the bodies back without authorization from the family. The bodies were prepared unsatisfactorily for the families because they were rushed at that point or felt rushed. Then there's the other problem. Delia was an organ donor. Since they had her misidentified, they harvested organs from Samara Cooks instead of Delia.
These two lawsuits lay out those painful allegations. They say Delia Gibson and Samara Cooks had their identities mistaken, and in turn, they were taken to the wrong funeral homes. It's hard to imagine.
Delia and Samara do not look nothing alike. They do not look nothing alike. So I don't understand how this could even happen.
The two best friends, 18-year-old Dalia Gibson and 15-year-old Samara Cooks, misidentified after they died in a car crash last year. The pain this mistake has caused, almost unbearable for their parents.
I just really wish that they would have treated her with dignity, let her go out like a lady.
Because the family were looking for answers and were receiving none, a lawsuit was filed. The lawsuit is against the Florida Highway Patrol, the County Medical Examiner's Office, and the two funeral homes that were in charge of the bodies. Andrea Minyard is actually the coroner of Escambia County, and Captain Richard Warden was the district commander for the Florida Highway Patrol in Escambia County. Tracy Morton is actually the person who was in charge of embalming Samara Cooks, and Michael Atwood and Teresa Atwood were the ones that are responsible at Faith Chapel funeral services for Dalia's body. Now, the lawsuit alleges that when the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office obtained control of the victims' bodies, they did not properly ID them. They remained tagged as opposites. Since the bodies were switched, sentimental personal jewelry belonging to Samara Cooks was lost. Andrea Minyard, who is the medical examiner, did not enforce appropriate policies and procedures regarding identification of the bodies. She also extracted several organs from Samara, who was not an organ donor. Since the two girls were switched, that also meant that their death certificates were switched. So, for example, the cause of death would be switched as well for both ladies. There was no authorization for organ extraction. Andrea Minyard released Samara Cooks to Faith Chapel. It was just a nightmare of a situation in regards to the funeral home. Renata Cooks had entered into a contract with Faith Chapel for embalmment, visitation, and funeral services. Now, the Escambia County Medical Examiner improperly verified and mislabeled the identities of the bodies and did not allow the families to view their own loved ones. Renata Cook's attorney, Artie Shimmick, argues that the U.S. Supreme Court actually says that citizens are entitled to have access to the bodies of their deceased relatives, but these families were both denied that right. Artie Shimmick further said, had the medical examiner allowed the families to see their loved ones, they would have discovered right away that the name tags were wrong. Renata Cook says that she has nightmares, anxiety, extreme emotional trauma, and loss of appetite. Tammy Gibson, Leah's mother, says that her mental state has deteriorated. Dalia's father, Demetrius Gibson, said that the mix-up had delayed the grieving process for his family, and that his daughter's last wishes were not fulfilled because she was an organ donor. She wanted to help people, maybe even save someone's life. And the lawsuit had to be filed because these families need answers and so far have received nothing in the way of answers.
Happy that she did have a chance to meet Dalia, and they had the four amigos, which were her and her cousins and Dalia, and I'm happy she had that in her final days, Dalia's a beautiful young lady also, so I'm happy that she didn't, leave alone, even though it was very tragic, and I hate the way that Samara was treated in that the final week of we couldn't see her, couldn't get those last moments in, and then when I was allowed to visit with her, I was robbed of that first chance of viewing her because I did walk in and see Miss Dalia, and it was not Samara. Tammy got that chance to see my daughter. And I took that away from her, and she was, and it was taken away from her. I was just so nervous, and it's just saddened by the situation. I just really wish that they would treat her with dignity. You know, let her go out like a lady. The worst feeling you can ever feel in your heart is to lose a child, and also just feel like they just did not have any compassion, didn't pay any attention. It just felt like they were just treated like all nonchalant.
As of the time of this video, the lawsuit is still ongoing, and the family of Dalia Gibson is being represented by attorney Jessica Givens. Renata Cooks is being represented by Artie Shimmick, but their lawsuits are nearly identical. Dalia Gibson's brother spoke about the girls on camera with the news station.
Four were inseparable. Dalia, Dejanique, and Alexandria grew up together in Cantonment. Samara recently moved to the area, and the group quickly became family.
They were all four best friends. They loved each other. You wouldn't catch one of them without each other.
The two funeral homes had no statements that were made. The Florida Highway Patrol said it extends its deepest condolences to the families for their tragic loss. As you can imagine, this has just been a horrible ordeal for the families, and I'm sure it does slow down the grieving process, especially considering the lawsuit. So I just wanted to cover this story, and I appreciate you guys for watching it, and I hope I continue to do videos like this in the future.